Hi, everybody. This is stuff that's due November 3rd, if you can. So what you're going to do is watch the presentation, which you're doing now, and then either while you're doing that or after, you go back in and make sure to watch the various YouTube videos that I have up on here, and we'll talk about them in a minute. Then there's two forums, neither of which should take you a whole lot of time, but it's instead of having a discussion that we would have had about this. One is the Attachment and Temperament forum, where I want you to discuss a kid you've worked with or somebody you just know and explain what type of attachment they seem to have and why, and then reply to at least one other person. The other forum is a moral development forum, because those are the things that we're going to be talking about today. And why is it important for early childhood educators to understand about the stages of moral development? It doesn't have to be a long answer, but post an answer to that and then reply to at least one other person. There are 3 YouTube videos here. There's a bit of overlap. Bowlby was the first one to come up with a theory of attachment. And I think this is a pretty interesting, and none of these are more than maybe 8-10 minutes long. The types of attachment one, and Ainsworth was a student of Bowlby's and developed a way to test for Bowlby's ideas about attachment. And then there's definitely some overlap with this one, but this one talks about different types of attachment, secure, insecure attachment, and so on. So please watch those. Then I'm going to show you this one right here, and this is one you'll watch. There's definitely some overlap here, but I like the way that it puts together temperament and attachment, and it does it in a shorter period of time than I would have done it in. But on this one, this is something nice to have, and you can download this if you want. It's kind of, to me, in my mind, it's a bit backwards, but second, they have temperament traits. And Thomas and Chess were, believe it or not, grad students when they came up with this and completely changed the world of early childhood and psychology. They said that there were 9 different temperament traits that you're born with and that stay relatively stable over time. And they actually did what's called the New York longitudinal study, where they looked at babies and then followed them into adulthood. So that's an incredible study, and you can read all about that if you look up New York longitudinal study, and especially if you put temperament in there. But the activity level, are they very energetic or sedentary? How regular are they? Are they predictable about when they want to eat, when they want to sleep, or very variable? What's their initial reaction to new people and situations? Are they open to that or very reluctant with that? Do they adapt easily to changes? Are they resistant to that, or do they accommodate those kinds of things easily? How intense are their emotions? Are they very outgoing and very exuberant about it, or much less intense? I don't like this term, the exuberant versus lethargic. I think that's wrong. I think it should be high intensity or low intensity, but I'm not the one who made this up. So mood, do they mostly have a positive or negative mood, or just sort of an average mood? Are they very easily distracted and sidetracked from what they're doing, or are they pretty attentive? Persistence, the attention span, are they able to stay with an activity? And these two, of course, go together. And then sensory threshold, are they very easily irritated by the texture of clothing or sounds and stuff? And now all of us have some little sensory thing. I have a friend who can't stand to have her food touch on a plate. But, those don't really have too much, they don't really hurt you in life. But other kinds of sensory issues do. If you can't stand any kind of noise, If bright lights set you off, that's more difficult. So I'd like you to just read through here, because they talked about the characteristics of each of those. And this has been backed up for many, many, many years. And this is probably from 40 or 50 years ago. But I think they do this in the opposite direction that they should, but then they give you ideas for responding to various different kinds of temperaments. And one thing to think about is what makes children's temperaments difficult for a teacher or a daycare provider or a caregiver of any sort. What kinds of things? Like, is it high activity, low activity? And part of that depends, of course, on the caregiver, on their personality too. But one thing we do know is that these personality traits don't change. They can change a bit, and people can certainly change their way of looking at the world. But in general, personality or temperament, and I'm using them interchangeably, not everybody does, but for now I think it's simpler to just talk about them that way. So this personality thing does tend to be pretty stable throughout life. So you've got that here, and then, like I said, this is another YouTube video which is a lecture really about how do temperament and attachment go together. Why is it not letting me go to the next? Oh. Now I want to talk just for a couple minutes about moral development. Now there's lots more than just Piaget and Kohlberg. There's Nucci. I'm missing some names right now, but Piaget and Kohlberg are the two of the best known ones. And if you look at Kohlberg's thing here, let's see, do I have? Yeah, I do have this. Okay. So if you look at level 1, pre-conventional morality, so right and wrong is determined by rewards and punishment. So very young kids think this way, that if something leads to a punishment, then that behavior is wrong. So the right way to behave is the way that is rewarded. Okay, so that's pre-conventional morality. And just so that you know, I mean, I'm talking about young kids here, but you'll run into adults who haven't gone too far past this also. Level 2 is conventional morality. And that does take into into consideration other people's views, but they matter mostly so that you're not being blamed and so that you get approval from people. So by stage 3, you behave in ways that conform to a general idea of good behavior. And in stage 4, it's obedience to authority. So it's the importance of doing one's duty or being obedient in some way. So it's a little bit of a higher level, but it's still not a very abstract way to think about right and wrong. And by the way, Kohlberg's theory does have to do with rules and laws. So each person who has done this looks at it a little bit differently. And if you get interested in this, look up Nucci and just look up theories of moral development, and you'll get a lot of those. Finally, the highest level is post-conventional morality, and now it becomes more abstract, so that the rights of people can override obedience to laws and rules. For example, well, first of all, I'll go through stage 5 and 6, and then I'll give you an example. Stage 5 is the difference between moral and legal right is something that people at that level understand. And people who are starting to be adolescents, and certainly young adults, should be able to think this way, that rules should sometimes be broken if the rule is not legitimate. So for example, if people who protest something, that might be legal but isn't moral. And finally, stage 6, that individual principles of conscience take hold here. And this is in young adulthood, that everybody who's affected by a moral decision, you have to think about that. So at this point, so it's completely the opposite of this, where it's all about you, and whatever leads to punishment is wrong, whatever is the right way to behave is whatever becomes rewarded. Well, we know that you can be rewarded for doing really bad things. So it's not until this level 3 that you're really taking that into consideration. Piaget is a bit different, and this has more to do with moral reasoning than thinking about laws and regulations. And what he said was 0 to 5 years are pre-moral. There's little understanding of rules. And you understand, this is similar to Piaget's to Kohlberg's pre-conventional, because the idea is that others regulate the children's behavior by saying no, or yes, or that's good, or that's bad. And so one of the things that I want to point out, though, is that if you start to read newer research, and I'm talking about in the last 10 years or so, we now know that young children can do a lot of things that back in Piaget's day they didn't think they could do. So I would take these numbers with a grain of salt. I've known 5-year-olds who were past this point. And certainly for the next one, 9-year-olds who were past that point. But Piaget said that from 5 to 9 years, there's moral realism, or heteronymous morality. And the idea there is that adults or God give rules. Those rules cannot be broken. And punishment is indicated not by the intention of what the person did, but by the amount of damage. So to people who are at this level of moral reasoning, if somebody knocks over a vase, it doesn't matter whether they meant to, whether they were doing it without self-control, or they did it because the dog bumped into them and they did it accidentally. That determines the punishment. So that's it's a bit better. It's a bit higher level than just other people regulate children's behaviors, but it's still very rule bound. And then finally, by the time children become 10 or so, you get more of a morality of cooperation. So instead of having the moral realism, you now have moral relativism, understanding that rules and regulations and morals change depending on certain circumstances and contexts. So for example, at the lower level of Piaget's or Kohlberg's, if you asked somebody, a guy's wife is dying and there's one medication that can save her life, but they don't have any insurance and it's prohibitively expensive. So the husband breaks into a pharmacy and steals the medication and saves his wife's life. Is that okay or not? And if you have somebody at a very early age, or let's say a very early stage of development, they will say no, because it's the law. You're not allowed to break into someplace. By the time you're at one of the higher stages, you're saying, yes, I mean, he may have to face the consequences of breaking in, but morally it was the right thing to do because he saved somebody's life by doing it, and the rule was what was unfair. Or the context was what was unfair. So that is the end of this. I want to show you on here. I want to show you on here. Oh no, come on. How did that happen? Okay. Got completely out of that. Sorry. All right. So you'll see I have a lot of things. These were here before. I've completely redone everything. So my lectures that I'm doing now is going to be up here. You won't see any of this stuff. And then the only other things you'll see are 2 forums. One on attachment and temperament, which I've already discussed, but I also have it down here. And I have a forum on moral development. And this one's a little bit more abstract than this one. So, and there's no readings for November 3rd. So just do those. My recommendation is to kind of do them a little at a time, so you don't have to do it all like November 2nd or 3rd. And also, of course, be working on your presentation. So just let me know if you need any kind of assistance on any of this. So thank you so much for watching.